I never imagined my own husband would stand in our living room and wave legal separation papers in my face like he had just won the lottery. The man I promised to spend my life with stared at me with cold calculation and demanded we end our marriage immediately. He proudly proclaimed that his father recently passed away and left behind a massive fortune. He sneered and told me I was nothing but a temporary bank account. My name is Corinne Holloway, and I am 42 years old working as a corporate sales director in Charlotte. Life before this nightmare was stable and predictable. I built a solid career and maintained a healthy savings account while searching for genuine companionship. Everything shattered when Vance handed me those documents with a cruel smile on his face. He confessed that he only married me to survive financially until his wealthy parent passed on. To comprehend how I ended up facing this catastrophic betrayal, you must understand the tragedy of my past. Years ago, I was happily married to a wonderful construction worker who tragically died in a sudden accident on site. That devastating loss completely broke my spirit but left me with a substantial life insurance settlement. His elderly parents insisted I keep the entire sum to rebuild my shattered existence. I was a young widow with significant wealth and overwhelming loneliness. I poured all my energy into my demanding sales job to escape the suffocating silence of my empty apartment. That was the vulnerable state I was in when Vance Sterling suddenly entered my professional circle. He was a charismatic representative from a partner firm who knew exactly how to make me smile again. We bonded over shared conversations at industry events, and he patiently listened to the painful stories about my late husband, without showing any discomfort. Vance seemed remarkably self-aware and constantly joked about his own inability to maintain relationships. We began spending evenings together exploring the city and discussing his complicated childhood growing up under a highly successful real estate developer. He masked his deep insecurities with irresistible charm and impulsive energy that made me feel alive again. When he finally proposed marriage during a casual dinner date, I pushed aside my lingering doubts and enthusiastically agreed to become his wife. Shortly after accepting his proposal, he casually mentioned that he currently lived with his ailing parent and required my presence there. I agreed to meet the elder Sterling and walked into a spectacular brick estate that radiated quiet elegance. His father, Arthur, was a frail but incredibly warm man who immediately treated me with genuine respect. We engaged in deep conversations about business and community development, while Vance sat in the corner scrolling mindlessly on his phone. After our wedding, we moved into the grand estate so Vance could supposedly act as a full-time caregiver for Arthur. I continued working exhausting hours at my corporate job while providing financial support for my new husband. Arthur and I developed a beautiful bond as he shared inspiring stories about funding local charities and building community centers. He possessed a generous soul and frequently warned me that his son lacked the maturity to appreciate real value. The domestic harmony dissolved rapidly when my husband abandoned all his daily responsibilities and hired external help to manage the household. He spent his days lounging around the massive home and ordering expensive food while completely ignoring his father. I noticed severe issues when a brand new luxury vehicle suddenly appeared in our driveway without any prior discussion. Vance had secretly accessed my emergency funds and selfishly purchased the expensive car just to satisfy his own ego. I reviewed my bank statements in absolute horror and discovered he had drained nearly $50,000 from my savings. He bought premium golf clubs and designer clothing while assuming I would simply tolerate his massive financial abuse. When I confronted him about the stolen funds, he rolled his eyes and casually dismissed my entirely justified anger. He smugly declared that his father possessed hundreds of millions and we would be incredibly rich very soon anyway. I immediately revoked his access to my accounts and endured his relentless complaints about my supposed lack of generosity. The tension inside the house became absolutely unbearable, but I refused to abandon Arthur to the care of his greedy son. The older gentleman frequently apologized for the terrible behavior of my husband and expressed profound regret over his spoiled nature. Arthur even utilized his own funds to renovate our living spaces just to make my daily routine somewhat easier. During one quiet afternoon, Arthur requested my assistance in organizing his private legal documents and final estate preparations. As we reviewed the massive folders, I uncovered a shocking financial reality that his arrogant son knew absolutely nothing about. Arthur had utilized his entire massive fortune as direct collateral for a failed community development project in the city. The massive bank loan required full repayment, and the enormous grace period was rapidly approaching a permanent expiration date. Arthur calmly explained that if he passed away before launching a new project, the banking institution would completely seize the remaining assets. He explicitly tasked me with managing the fallout because he knew his son lacked the discipline to handle a massive crisis. I solemnly promised to honor his final wishes while watching Vance continue to purchase ridiculous gadgets online with zero concern for the future. I carried the heavy burden of this terrible secret completely alone. The inevitable tragedy finally struck when Arthur suffered a fatal medical emergency right before a major milestone birthday celebration. The sprawling estate felt devastatingly empty, and I spent days mourning the loss of a man who treated me like true family. While I was actively drowning in profound grief, my husband proudly strutted into the living room clutching a stack of legal documents. He wore a disgusting grin and happily announced that he was finally abandoning our marriage. Vance cruelly boasted about checking the primary bank accounts and discovering $500 million waiting for his sole usage. He looked directly into my tearful eyes and stated that he only tolerated my presence to fund his lavish lifestyle during the waiting period. My entire body shook with overwhelming fury as I realized he viewed his wonderful father as nothing more than a convenient ATM machine. I fought the intense urge to scream at his disgusting face. Remembering the calm wisdom of the man who just died, I forced my breathing to steady and masked my burning rage. I snatched the separation documents from his greedy fingers and swiftly signed my name across the dotted lines without shedding a single tear. I firmly instructed him to handle the legal filing himself and marched right out the front door of that beautiful brick home. A strange wave of incredible relief washed over my tired soul. A few days later, I sat comfortably in a temporary hotel room when my mobile device erupted with frantic incoming calls. I answered the line and immediately heard Vance screaming in absolute panic about frozen financial accounts and locked banking profiles. He hysterically explained that the bank refused to release the massive fortune and demanded to know what magical trick I had played. I leaned back against the plush pillows and allowed a slow smile to form. I kept my tone perfectly level and informed him that his incredible ignorance had finally destroyed his glorious fantasy. I revealed the crushing truth about the failed community center and explained that the bank was actively seizing the primary funds to settle the massive debts. The utter silence on the other end of the connection sounded like the total collapse of his entire greedy universe. I informed him about the tiny remaining inheritance designated for his basic survival. He desperately pleaded with me to cancel the separation and begged for access to my stable income to survive his impending poverty. I coldly reminded him that his selfish choices carried permanent consequences and firmly terminated the pathetic conversation forever. He eventually forwarded half of the miserable remaining inheritance, which I immediately deposited directly into a secure savings account. I view those funds as a beautiful tribute to a generous mentor who actually understood the true value of loyalty. I recently purchased a lovely condominium overlooking the beautiful downtown skyline and returned to dominating my corporate sales career. I am no longer a grieving widow desperately seeking comfort or a foolish woman being exploited by a manipulative partner. I am building a spectacular new chapter completely focused on authentic connections and genuine personal growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember to always trust your intuition when someone reveals their true colors.